All right, so it's getting to that time of the year. It's pretty much the 1st of April right now, and there's several things that are going to start happening in the bays that are going to trigger some different types of fish activity. One of those things that's going to happen, that's probably one of my, it's going to turn into one of my favorite bites, is coming out of the head of the bay, we're going to have a lot of crabs, shrimp, eels that are going to flush out on outgoing tides. And what's going to happen is, as they start from the head of the bay and work their way through, they're going to pass through a series of bridges. Now what happens is as that tide's falling and these crabs are floating through on the surface, working their way toward the Gulf, these big bull redfish are going to move into these bridges, and they're going to stage up there, and they're going to start assaulting these crabs on a daily basis. So what we'll do a lot of times, is we will take this right here is a skitterwalk, and this is actually in a redfish color. And granted, these redfish are not out eating other redfish. However, this is very similar in color and kind of in profile to a blue crab. And you may say, well, why is it, like a blue crab? Well, a lot of times what happens is when this bait's sitting there, you can see these hooks are just dangling in the water. All right, so as this bait's floating through on the tide, there's almost always a little rip, and these things are just kind of going by, and they actually look like little legs. So we will throw these baits up current. You'll see fish will pop. If it's slick, you can actually see the crabs coming across the surface just with a very subtle light weight to them. It's not like they're swimming hard. They're just kind of floating with the tide. And the redfish come up and annihilate them. So what we'll do is we'll set up in an area where we can tell crabs are coming through. We can see fish blowing up on them. And the fish aren't always schooling because they're not really feeding on a type of forage that's schooling. So the crabs are kind of spread out, so the fish are kind of spread out. So what we'll do is when we see the fish blow up on the surface, we will present our skitterwalks, in this case, up current of the fish. And instead of working it back like you would work it on the flats, trying to make it appear to be a mullet or some type of bait fish, we will actually just kind of hit it one time, just enough to make it kind of in the water, and then we let it sit. We just let the current do the work. So now our bait's just kind of floating by, nice and easy, just kind of floating like this. And of course you can hear it's got a little rattle, so every time it moves back and forth, ever so slightly, it's putting off some sound too. And you just would not believe the reaction that it gets from fish. You can sit out there and you can work it, and you may not get bit, but we'll throw it up and we'll just let it kind of float every so often, just give it one little pop just to give it a little bit of splash and bring some attention to it, and then let it float by. And these redfish cannot stand it. They just will climb out of the water right next to the boat like they don't care. They're not afraid of anything. They're out in open water, and they just will unleash havoc on these things.